Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I'm Nick Park, and I'm taking us through a series of teachings called Dinner with Jesus. We're looking at the times that Jesus ate with people or people ate with Jesus, and what happened there. Because it's amazing how many times Jesus just dropped some truth bombs into the midst of just people having dinner together. And today we're looking at the account of Jesus eating with the tax collectors and the sinners at Matthew's house. We find this actually all three of the synoptic gospels, so not John, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all record this event, how Matthew, otherwise known as Levi, was called to be one of the disciples of Jesus, that he was a tax collector, and then Jesus was eating with tax collectors and sinners. So Matthew gathered all his friends from his old life, and they had a dinner together with Jesus, and it's recorded in Matthew chapter 9, in Mark chapter 2, and in Luke chapter 5. And it's very interesting, actually, that Mark and Luke call this disciple Levi. Matthew himself calls himself Matthew. Now, it wasn't unusual in those days for people to have two names, and very often, because you were talking Jewish people relating with a predominantly Greek-speaking world, people could often have a Hebrew name and a Greek name. So Levi could well be his Hebrew name, and Matthew would be his Greek name. But it's interesting, the names of them as well. The name Levi means, it comes from a root word meaning to take. And Matthew means the gift of God. And God took somebody who was a taker, who was a tax collector, who ripped people off. And God turned Levi into Matthew, somebody who was a gift of God to the church. But anyway, all three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all three synoptic Gospels, record then the conversation that took place at Matthew's house. And Jesus was asked, well, actually, he wasn't asked. The question was asked to his disciples. The people who asked this didn't have the courage to ask him to his face, as is often the case with critics. Instead, they asked his disciples, "Why does your master eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus, when he heard this, answered, and he said, "It is not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. I have come to call sinners, not the righteous." And the wonderful thing here is, you see, the people were criticizing Jesus because they thought who you ate with was tremendously important, because they judged you by the company that you kept. And also there was a little bit about the cleanness, uncleanness. If you were Jews and you were mixing with people who were sinners, who were involved in business transactions with Gentiles, whatever else, then you could become unclean just by eating with them. But the Pharisees judged others by the company that they kept. But Jesus kept company to change others. You know, Jesus was not defined by the company that he kept, but rather the people he met were defined by the fact that he kept company with them. And he brought change, and he brought the opportunity for freedom and salvation, forgiveness and liberation into their lives. Now, Matthew also adds something into the mix here when he describes it in his gospel that Mark and Luke left out. Matthew said, and perhaps because it was Matthew's house where it happened, he might remember a few more details. He records that Jesus then added a saying, well, of scripture from Hosea chapter 6, verse 6, that says, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice." Because what Jesus was saying was this, is that mercy and love and compassion for people is more important than our traditions. The Pharisees, the scribes, would not meet with the kind of people that Jesus was meeting with in Matthew's house because they were scared of uncleanness. But Jesus said, I'm going to meet them on their turf, on their territory, on their ground. I'm going to meet them where they are so I can minister the word of life to them. And you know what? Now, we do need to be careful as Christians that we don't get caught into situations where we compromise our beliefs and our righteousness. But nevertheless, we can't just expect everybody to come to us. We can't expect if somebody needs the gospel, they have to come to the church. It's got to be on our terms. We need to go and meet people where they are, and we need to share the mercy and the love of Jesus with them. And that's what Jesus did in Matthew's house. Thank you for joining us today. Join us again next time for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.